أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. جزاكم الله khair for joining us for another session. Today, inshallah, we're going to be joined by our relationship coach, Yasmin Al-Hadi, inshallah, to talk a little bit about a topic that we've had a lot of sisters requesting us to do a live on. So I'm going to go ahead and let her into the session, inshallah, and get started. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, man.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So we've had, as I mentioned to you before, we were going to do a session on Friends, but then a bunch of sisters started contacting us and they were like, please, can you run a session on this big, scary topic called in-laws? So I was like, oh, I love a bit of that. So sure. So we changed things up a little bit. And today, inshallah, we're going to be talking about in-laws, in and out of bounds with in-laws, with your in-laws. And when we put that out, we had a lot of sisters contacting us with questions, and some really great questions. And when they started coming in, I realized that, to be honest, we can't run one session on this topic just because it's so big.
Yep.
We had, and I was just looking over some of the questions and I thought, okay, well, there's possibly two ways to sort of do this. And again, I'm just going to chuck the thoughts out there, and I'm also going to just throw out the questions and we'll see how we go. But a lot of these things are usually discussed before marriage. And then there's the element of once you're actually married, you don't know somebody, like they say, until you're actually living with them. Yeah. And for some women, they do end up living with their in-laws. So it's just one of those situations, right? So I'm going to go ahead with some of the questions that came in about in-laws before marriage, right? And again, this can be addressed, I think, from both angles, before you're married and once you're actually married. So one of the sisters asked, and I thought this was an amazing question, and it might be a little bit of a tough one, but what somebody asked, what are signs that your in-laws are toxic for your relationship?
No
I
big
thought
deal.
You may laugh.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been wanting to do a Red Flags Marry Mondays on actually this particular topic, because I have a Red Flags Marry Mondays on people who could be very toxic for your life, people who could be narcissistic, who could be manipulative, etc. And so I have like all the red flags, like I think a total of maybe 14 of them that I talk about there, and things to watch out for, because some people have one of them but they don't have all of them, you know. So it's one of those things that when you're looking at somebody, you have to see someone in the totality of their circumstances. So it's not like one flag is going to set you off and be like, no way are my in-laws going to be healthy for me, they're going to be so toxic. But I think it's a combination of these factors when you balance them with the positive factors that you see in people as well. So just understand that when we look at someone, we have to see them holistically. Everyone is going to have faults, but when we weigh those faults against their qualities that are equitable, qualities that would be favorable, positive things that make you endear to them, that make you, love them, we have to see which one wins, kind of. And we definitely want to be in a majority positive situation. So I think one of the major things that some in-laws who are quite toxic do is that from the beginning, from before marriage, they have inserted themselves into big decisions in your life. And so what I mean by that is that they want to give a say about, or have a say about where you live, what you study, what profession you're going to do, what your timeline for children are, whether you travel or not. So those are some things that I will say that this need to insert control, exert control, and insert themselves into every aspect of their child's life, and it will be your life as well. So just remember and understand that that's a mirror. The relationship that they have with their child is a mirror to the relationship that they're going to have with you. Not to say that, oh my God, they love their child, it's a great relationship, of course they're going to love me and it's going to be a great relationship. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm talking about these types of elements, like control, like that is a sign that they are going to also exert they're going to want to exert control on every decision that you guys make as a couple, but also on issues that are associated with your life. So that's what I'll first say. That's one of the red flags. And giving an opinion is different than emotionally blackmailing someone or manipulating someone into having to choose your choice for them. So if your parents or their parents, give opinions on your life, like, oh, are you sure you want to do that or whatnot? That's another thing. That's a whole other thing. But it's saying, no, if you loved me, you would choose this. That's emotional blackmail. If you really cared about me, you would never do that. This type of parenting that basically disallows your child to actually live their own life or make their own decisions is a very dangerous, I think, prospect for emotional health. And I think it is a major sign for toxicity. Also, the control thing kind of just basically comes down to, I think maybe the better way to say it, because this is kind of one of my red flags also for narcissists, is that it has to be their way. And sometimes you can really see it in the wedding preparation, where like everything has to be, if everything has to be in one family's way, like everything, they have to dictate the clothing, the food, the venue, and they don't want your input. And in fact, when you give your input, they see it as a sign of disrespect. This is a sign of a red flag. And we have a lot of toxic wedding culture. We have that, okay? But in the immigrant American Muslim community, and in many ways we are still connected to some type of immigrant background. If you look at the Muslim community, obviously we're still outnumbered by African American Muslims who are in this country. But if you look at the population who have come from other places, from outside of the United States, and are not native to the United States, you see that three-quarters of them have some type of connection to an immigrant background. This is Pew statistics. So 3/4 of us still have kind of a foot in another culture, and we're thinking about things from a different culture. So when the wedding has to be, it's like my way or the highway. This is a big red flag. And there's just no room for you. I will also say that if a in-law is looking at the credit card statements of their children and has access to all their bank accounts, that's just a red flag that this person may not actually be ready to be in an independent relationship, in an independent marriage. I think finances are a tricky thing, because if some people are getting married young, they need to be living with their parents for whatever reason. If they're young and they don't have a job, or their parents just want to help them or whatever. But I do think that creates some toxicity when there is complete financial control. And to be honest, I'm not sure if you're ready to be married and take that step and to that responsibility until you have an independent source of income and you have some independence on the banking front, that you have your own bank account, and that someone doesn't have insight into everything that's kind of going on. Because I know some parents that require you to show them the credit card statements. That's abusive. That is financially abusive in a marriage. I've seen that, because what ends up happening is that ends up translating in the marriage itself, that if the wife spends something or if the husband spends something, the parent who's watching everything on the credit card statement is like, why did you spend on this? They'll start questioning you about, why did you buy that? Or, oh, this is because, he's taking all your money or she's taking all your money. Try your best to have that separation there, because if that's just a red flag. That's another red flag. There's so many more, but those are just some that I would say, but they all kind of center on control. Like toxicity, the reason why we call it that, the thing is that word is thrown around a lot. Toxic, that person is toxic, that relationship's toxic, whatever. But I want to instead step back and think, like, toxicity, what we're talking about here, we're talking about definitionally what we're talking about here, is when in a relationship, someone is trying to exert control and coerce you into doing things that are against your will. And so that toxicity kind of translates into like a mental and an emotional abuse. an abuse of their authority, a spiritual abuse, abuse of their finances, like a financial abuse, some type of abuse that's happening to exert control.
Do you think that, so here's something that, and again, I've heard a lot of different opinions, and I would love to know what you think, because in relationships like that, where there's a lot of this, and like you said, it's a control issue where in-laws feel like they they have a say whether you travel or whether you spend on this or whether you spend the weekend going out as opposed to having dinner with them, and all of the, and there's different layers to it, right?
Right.
But it's to what extent is that okay, and how do you separate it from being abusive as opposed to it not being abusive, as opposed to it just being a caring, protective parent?
Yes. It's all in the reaction when you say no. That's where it all is. When you go, no mom, no dad, no mother-in-law, no father-in-law, what's their reaction? Because somebody who's caring and loving can say, hey, I'd love for you to come over. I'd love for you to do this. And you go, no, I don't want to. And they go, okay, maybe next time. Or, I'd really love to see you make some time for me in your schedule. You're always a little bit too busy. There's a kind way to say it. There's a nice way. And then there's a, wow, I can't believe you would say no again. You've said no now for the past 4 weeks. This is ridiculous. You don't respect me. So do you see the difference?
Right.
It's all in the no. If the no comes with the reaction is one of feeling deep offense and disrespect, I would say you need to take a step back, because most likely that person can't actually respect your boundaries. They can't actually respect your boundaries. And like love and good, positive relationships are always in respect of boundaries. They always are. And I will also say that, this is a delicate issue, and I know it is, because a lot of people have lived with their parents their whole life before they get married, or we have obviously a lot of high esteem for parents within Islam. We have bir al-walidain. We have, this idea of fidelity to parents. Some people call it obedience to parents. Some people call it, extreme care for parents and a high station for parents. We have all those things. But just remember that your spiritual license ends when abuse begins. So that spiritual license, that spiritual privilege that you have within the religion ends when you start harming people. When your words are against the religion. When your actions are against the way of the Prophet ﷺ, against the Sunnah. When your actions to try to split apart people, when your actions start to split apart people, that does not have the fragrance of the Prophet ﷺ. That doesn't smell like our religion. It doesn't pass the smell test. So just understand that. We don't want a situation where people feel as though they have a right over us, and yet they have no obligation or duty to God. Because if someone has a right over you and they have no obligation to God and they do not do what God says, then their rights end, because they are not an obligation to the Creator. So please sit with that, and just understand too that I think that this is a delicate situation, because people also, they love their parents and they want to so much please them. They want so much to make them happy, and I'm all about making your parents happy and loving on them, as like if you watch me, like I love my parents, like they're my heart and soul. But if my relationship is suffering because they are doing or saying things that are disrespectful, mean-spirited, unkind, and straight up haram, straight up in violation of my spouse's rights, then it's incumbent upon me to stand for justice, whether it's for me or against me, to stand for justice, whether it's for my family or against my family, because your obligation is to the Creator. And your obligation is to stop the violation of right, to reduce harm. That is a principle in our Sharia. That is a principle in the way that we live our lives. That's a spiritual and practical example of the reduction of harm always takes precedence to preserve life, property, dignity. These are some things, your happiness. These are important things. So for example, I will also say that, what we have in our community is people who feel the right to come over whenever they want. They just want to, like, in-laws just come over whenever they want. And if you see people just dropping by whenever they want and not calling, you have a right to say that this is a violation of my boundary. Like, your home is your sacred sanctity space. It's a sacred space. It's supposed to be full of sanctity. So when someone is just coming around and they're not calling, and there's a way to say it from a place of mercy, which is, I want to prepare so that I can properly honor you. I can't properly honor you if I don't know when you're coming, because I'm not prepared. I want to preserve this relationship. Preserving this relationship means that I need to speak to you in a way where I am mentally in the best state. I'm not mentally in the best state when I'm frantic and running around and don't know how to make sure that, that I've got guests over and to accommodate and to be, a gracious host. So there's a merciful way to do this. And then there's a merciful way to also talk to your spouse about that and say, in preservation, to preserve the relationship with your mom or your dad, right? I need you to support me, to make sure that you understand that my boundaries are loving boundaries. My boundaries are a place of reducing the overall harm in the relationship and bringing respect between us. As much as a lot of men allow their wives to be disrespected by their parents because apparently normal, how to stand your ground but be respectful. By saying just that, I think one of the best ways to stand your ground to say, life is about balance, and marriage is about balancing these different types of obligations and rights and responsibilities. That's all of our lives. Every relationship is based on that. And the key is to remember that when you're leading with, I want to reduce harm and I want to create the most mercy in my life, that means that I want to preserve a relationship by maybe not engaging at a level where I feel controlled by that person and disrespected by that person. That violates everybody's rights. And then now we are not an obligation to our creator. How can we talk about who has a right on who if we are not an obligation to our creator? That's being an oath to your Lord.
Right. So you're talking about boundaries, and I know somebody earlier posted something about boundaries also, about how important it is to have healthy boundaries. But how do you do that? And a lot of people I know, and I personally know somebody, a friend of mine, who was attending a wedding 2 months ago of her friend, and within a month and a half, the marriage was over because of in-laws. Yes. And again, I'm not saying it was because of them, but more so because there was an agreement of they'd be, there was, an agreement they would be living with them, and once they'd got married and moved in with them, she decided it was too much for her, and she wanted to, to leave. Yes. And I've heard of that a lot. Yes. So in that situation, how do you set healthy boundaries without offending the other person? Because I know that is something that, and again, you spoke about cultural differences, right? And a lot of the times, you might marry somebody who, although you might be both from the same culture, you might both be, Pakistani, but I was raised in the States and you were raised in Pakistan. So our culture is very different, Absolutely. So how do you set those healthy boundaries?
I think you have to know, first of all, what your boundaries are. And a lot of people don't know them until after marriage. This is a great example that you just gave. So someone was like, yeah, I'll live with my in-laws. And then they live with their in-laws and they're like, I actually can't do this. So a part of being in a marriage with somebody who is flexible enough to understand and have like grace and mercy with you is to know that you don't always know all your boundaries and you're learning them. And a part of being in a forgiving marriage of mawadda and rahma, of deep emotion and of mercy, is to say, I am going to be learning along the way what makes me feel extremely anxious, what makes me feel disrespected, what makes me feel unloved and unwanted. When your spouse wants you to feel those things, seen, wanted, heard, respected, that's mawadda and rahma. That's someone who is in a space of mercy and deep love, deep adoration. That's where we should be, I think, guiding the conversation, which is that if you do a weekly check-in with your spouse, if you're in the process of constantly talking about the relationship and working on it, then you realize, hey, I don't know everything right now. I'm relationship young with you, and I'm going to be learning things. But as long as we have each other's back, we have to be a strong unit. If you don't want to be a unit with me, that's okay too. But my intent in going to this relationship is to be a strong unit here, and that is fulfilling my obligation to the Creator. And that means your first and primary responsibility is this unit here. Now that you've married, now that you're in this relationship, this is now your duty and obligation to make sure that the family that you're creating is one of mawadda and rahma, that you have sakina in your home, that you have peace in your home, and that you are garments for one another, that you are covering each other's faults and you are accentuating each other's beauty. You cannot do that without saying, I don't know what my boundaries are and I'm learning them, and I hope that you're flexible enough with me to, when I'm saying that I feel disrespected and hurt, that I get a reaction from me to say, how do we make it better? Because it's all in the know, because even here it's important. So when you say, I don't really like that, that's a no-go for me. And someone goes, you're overblowing it, you're ridiculous, you're oversensitive, this is crazy, you're insane. Okay, when someone is speaking to you that way, that's not a place of mawadda and rahmah. That's not a place of somebody who is concerned about being merciful with your heart. So why would you want to continue on a relationship with somebody who's not going to hold you, who's not going to hold your heart and hold space for you? We have to hold space for each other. And so I think that, number one, you have to learn your boundaries. And then number two, in communicating them, I think that it has to be on a week-to-week basis. You have to be in a constant communication with your spouse about what those boundaries look like and what they mean for you. And then finally, you have to look to see, what is the reaction? What is the reaction that I receive? Is this one of loving compassion? Is this one where I want to continue on with this person? Or maybe this isn't the right fit for me. I do think that your boundaries have to have consequences. When your boundaries don't have consequences, people don't know whether it's a big deal to violate them or not. And take that for what you will, because everyone is in a different juncture, in their marriage. Some people are in the pre-marriage stage. Some people have been married for many years and have many children and have a very difficult time drawing their boundaries. But, you don't have a duty or an obligation to make sure that your in-laws see you every day. You don't have a silat rahim. You don't have a kinship tie to your in-laws. It's a privilege to be around each other. It should be a privilege for you to be around them, and it's a privilege for them to be around you. And I think that people treat you the way that you let them treat you. So you may have to go into a zone where you've been married for many years and your in-laws are straight up violating your rights and being disrespectful and doing things that are prohibited in the religion, like creating division, like stealing, like lying, like backbiting, like taking things that are not their right and saying it's their right. Okay? Those are the kinds of things that you should be able to say the consequences that I don't have a relationship here. That if we can't maintain a relationship based upon respect, we don't need to have a relationship. Or we need to have a minimized relationship. And if your spouse goes, that doesn't work for me, then you know that's not a place of mawadda and rahmah for you. We have to get really strong, for the women and the men here that are listening. We need to get really strong here about our understanding of what is right and wrong, and about being okay with communicating when something feels wrong. We need to be stronger. We don't need to be so scared all the time. This person's going to leave me. That person's going to hate me. If I do this, then they're going to think that. Are you doing something that is pleasing to your Creator? Are you in obligation and duty to God? If you are, and you're standing for what is just, you will always win. And if you are not standing for what is right, and you find that your spouse is not standing for what is right, then they will not stand for what is right in other situations. Then they will not be protecting you and your children in other situations. So get strong. Get stronger about what you need to do. And stop pretending like you don't know what to do.
Beautifully said. I have one last question for you, because I feel like, for me, I've experienced this a lot with a lot of women who ask this question, and I think it bounces off of what you've just said. It's being strong, standing up, and standing firm in what you believe, and ultimately everyone knows what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with. And like
Exactly.
you said,
And what hurts and what doesn't hurt.
right. And you don't know that until you've experienced it, right?
You don't know what you experience.
So,
Yeah.
right. So what is it? So in a situation, what would you recommend? Because I know that women, for example, you know, they enter a home, they've got their in-laws, they don't want to be the person, and you might be a strong person, you might be able to have that conversation with a co-worker or a friend and not take anything from anybody, but what do you think? Who should be the person that communicates that with the in-laws? Because I know that that's always a tricky one. And I've heard a lot of people say you should do it yourself.
I disagree with that. So the reason I disagree with that is that I think that your spouse has the full obligation to do that. I believe that spouses are the ambassadors to the country of you. Like, you are the ambassador to that country. So I always say that. So it's like diplomatic relations. You don't go up to a country and knock on the door and say, hey, no, you go to their ambassador and you say, here's my diplomatic cable. Here's what I'd like to communicate to your government. And so it's not your responsibility. It's not your obligation to talk to your in-law directly. In fact, this is what I always say. The ideal standard would be that you gain a new mom, you gain a new dad, you get a new family. But I would just like to say, like, get your head out the clouds for a second, guys, and just see your in-laws for what they are, which is strangers that you want to impress. Now, these strangers can offend you, and then you don't have to impress them anymore. But as long as they're there and they are not harming you, then impress them as strangers, meaning, like, they don't love you unconditionally. They may never love you unconditionally. And so you have to maintain, like, how much can I give to strangers that I want to impress without feeling like I'm being taken along for a ride, or this is a one-sided, lopsided relationship. But it also means that when you are approaching these people, because they are strange to you, you can't just speak with them frankly and honestly about all your thoughts and all your opinions and tell them all the things that are wrong in their son or daughter. You can't do that. Stop falling for these tricks where they're like, oh, please come to me. Yeah. Oh, if they do anything, I will take care of you. No, they won't take care of you. They're going to let you to hang out to dry there if you say one bad thing about their kid. So their kid is the one that communicates those things to you. And if that kid can't do that, then sorry, they are not ready to be in a relationship, not ready to be in a responsible role as the protector of your heart and as the person who will maintain diplomatic relations with your country. Just remember that. That means that they're not ready for that role. And that's okay too. We can be disappointed, but we can also be in acceptance of the fact that some people have limitations. And they will never be able to protect you and love you like you're worthy of. And that's okay too. It's okay to have your heart broken and for someone to disappoint you, but it's better than stringing along the pain, hoping that one day they'll figure it out. No, they need to be the ones who speak to your in-laws, not you, to say, this is unacceptable. This doesn't work for my spouse. Please try other ways to approach my spouse because this is hurting my spouse. Me and my spouse are one unit. When you hurt my spouse, you hurt me. This is my family. I am in balance. So in my heart, there are two rivers, one for my parent, one for my family, and another river that runs alongside of it for my new spouse, for my new family, for my new children that I'm creating. But these rivers, they don't take away from each other. They don't take away from each other. This love doesn't mean that I'm walking out on this love. This is two separate paths of love that I have to maintain. And it is their responsibility to stand up for what is right, your spouse. And to be honest, it's a character issue. And if they can't do that, then I'm telling you, they're going to really colossally disappoint you in many other ways. So better to be like, okay, you can't do this? All right, cool. We shouldn't be in relationship with each other because it's a privilege to even be in a relationship with me. It's a privilege to be in relationship with me. Not everyone is afforded that privilege. Not everyone should be afforded that privilege.
MashaAllah.
People will treat you the way that you let them treat you. Trust me on that one.
100%. I agree. and it's a shame more people don't give that kind of advice, because a lot of the times it's very rare that you'll hear that kind of advice. Our time is up, so we're going to close it here. We do have, to be honest, I think I started just bouncing off questions that I had just based off of what you were saying, but I think somewhat it was answering a lot of the questions. But we're hoping to do another session, inshallah, on the same topic, because it's definitely needed. I think a lot more women need to hear about these things, and a lot more men, to be honest. I know we're a platform that's dedicated for women, by women, but we definitely need men listening to these conversations. So we hope to continue these. Thank you so much, Yas, for all of your time, all of your beneficial advice. We hope, inshallah, to see you very, very soon, inshallah. And thank you so much. It's been great. We've still got people asking questions. We'll save them, inshallah, for the next slide.
But again, just remember, when you're in obligation with God, God will always have your back. And when you're in violation with God, then woe unto you. Woe unto you. And that's a character taqwa. That is a God consciousness issue. So don't be in violation of anyone's rights. I wish you all so much love and healing. And I know this is a tough topic, and I got a lot more to say about it. Love you guys.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.